Yesterday, with some finishing in record territory. This is America faced an economy in need, and President Biden's American Rescue Plan being rolled out. Virginia Tech economics professor David Bieri joins us now to talk more about that. Good to see you, Professor. Good morning.
Good morning.
One of the things that's interesting, you look at the day one of this new administration, and you think, okay, off to a decent start when it comes to the market, but it's day one of many. So what are we looking about, either positive news perhaps or concerns with the economy?
Well, it's a mixed bag. Positive news, of course, the economy is doing a lot better than one might suspect, particularly listening to the president's massive plan. In some ways, he has that thing that doctors have. Inaction is right now not acceptable. So he has to be seen to be doing something. On the risk side, we don't know what the future holds. And the size of this deal, or the proposed deal, is so massive that it could actually risk overheating the economy once everything hits the ground. And so in that sense, the jury's still out. And that's what you're seeing in the stock market this morning.
And Dow futures and futures across the board looking down for today. But again, we can't judge things by one day's performance. A conversation some of us had here recently was that as the economy, there were plenty of opportunities. I'll put it this way, Professor. Plenty of opportunities in the last year with the COVID situation for things to just completely fall apart. Instead, we've done okay. So I guess the question is, what potentially could turn things south? Because if we've weathered the storm of the last 9 or 10 months, what do we have to look out for?
It's ultimately inflation. And, in some ways, it's a really tricky situation to comment on because the Trump administration might have underperformed in terms of dealing with COVID, but it might not have underperformed or performed so badly in terms of its economic policies. The economy has taken a hit in the second quarter of last year when the lockdown happened, but it bounced back remarkably. And of course, your listeners this morning don't want to hear from a well-fed college professor that they should just batten down the hatches and weather it all out. But I would say this, the size of this plan is so massive that it dwarfs anything that America has ever seen in terms of absolute size. And it will rely on a lot of debt financing. So are we willing to mortgage our future just for the next few months to see through something that perhaps otherwise we might see through anyways? And then we will run out of steam to do greater things that America needs. And of course, the Biden administration hasn't had time to tell us what their exact plans for infrastructure are and so forth. But $1.9 trillion could essentially rebuild the interstate highway system 4 times over. So think about that.
No doubt. Plenty of ways to use that kind of money. If that plan would potentially run out of steam, is that something that we're talking about 2 months from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now? What would be an estimated timeline?
Well, then I have to defer to great economists and say in the medium term, whatever that means. But one of the risks certainly is not 2 months from now, but 9 to 18 months from now, that once we're through this pandemic, consumer confidence picks up, people will have a lot of disposable income. Real incomes in America are still above crisis levels. It's hard to believe sometimes, but the economy hasn't been bled out yet. And if that demand materializes, there is a real risk that we'll see inflation and the Fed will have to slam on the brakes. And then it could trigger a whole downward spiral that we don't want. And so in that sense, one should say use the bazooka with care. It's not a surgical instrument, but that's generally a problem in economic policy in the first place.
Well, it is good advice. And you see, this is exactly why we do want to hear from a professor at Virginia Tech this morning.